All right, here's the video for task number 2. We have a little bit of warm up. Notice your hypotenuse is 1, so it's very much like the unit circle. Go ahead and see if you can find the missing values for this. Pause the video, and when you come back, we'll do it together. All right, so hopefully on triangle number 1, you realized it was 45, 45, 90. Because it showed just x and those sides. When you see x in both places, that's just saying your sides are equal. And we know that our hypotenuse is root 2 times our legs of our triangle. So if you had divided both sides by root 2, you would get 1 over root 2. And if I rationalize, you get root 2 over 2, or maybe you just remembered it was root 2 over 2 from the unit circle. So the legs of this triangle are root 2 over 2. All right, so here we have our 30, 60, 90 triangle. So our angle up here must be 30. If this is the short side, because it's across from the smaller angle, we know it's half of what the hypotenuse is. So if the hypotenuse is 1, this is 1/2. And then our long side is root 3 times our short side. So that just gives us root 3 over 2. All right. So now we're going to use that unit circle, our knowledge of special right triangles, to find cosines and sines of angles. It's best to try to do this without looking at the unit circle, as we want to be able to develop an understanding of how the unit circle was made. So first it asks you to find cosine and sine for negative 360. So remember, negative goes in a clockwise direction. So here, this would be my negative 360. So I'm all the way back to where I started from at my initial side. And if my radius is 1 on a unit circle, then I know my point here is 1, 0. Or I know that cosine of negative 360 must be 1, where sine of negative 360 must be 0. So for the rest of them, I'm just going to write the ordered pair, and I want you just to realize that this is cosine and this is sine. My x is my cosine, my y is my sine. All right, next one is my theta is 180 degrees. So that's just right out here if I draw in my angle. This is 180 degrees. So out here at my points, another far edge of my unit circle, I know that cosine is negative 1 and sine is 0. And then the last one is 450 degrees. And it's positive, so we're going counterclockwise. So here's 360, and then if I add another 90, I'm at 450. So if we drew that in, that's lots of these rotations. So that's 450 degrees. And up here, I know that cosine is 0 because my x value is 0 and sine is 1. All right. Moving on to some harder angles. Then you guys will get some time for practice. So what are the cosine and sine of the angle? So 30 degrees. That one's pretty easy. It's right here in my first quadrant. I know that this must be my long side and this is my short side because it's across from the small angle. So I know that is 1/2 and this is root 3 over 2. So I can come up here and I can say that cosine of 30 degrees is root 3 over 2. And if your calculator was in degree form, it would give you the decimal version of this. and sine of 30 degrees is 1/2. All right, so let's try that for 300. So this is 90 up here. Here's 180, here's 270. So 300 is 30 degrees past 270. And that would make this angle left over, or my reference angle, 60 degrees. So let's pull that one out here. Well, let me draw my triangle in. So here's that triangle out here. Oops. Here's 60. Now here's 30 over here, and this is my 90. So we can see that the long side for this triangle is my y value. And on 30, 60, 90, that's √3/2. And my short side is my x value. So at 300, I'm just going to write it as an ordered pair. I have a positive 1/2 because my x values are positive in quadrant 4. But I'm not going to write a positive √3/2. In quadrant 4, my y values are negative, so I have to write a negative √3/2. All right, we have one more, 225. We know that's over here in quadrant 3 because it's between 180 and 270 degrees. And hopefully you realize, this is 225 degrees, that this angle here is 45. And if we drew our triangle in there, we know our sides are √2/2 and √2/2, and we just need to decide that in quadrant 3, those angles are both negative, or those values in quadrant 3 are both negative. And if you had your calculator in degree form, then if you did cosine of 225 or sine, you would get a negative value. It would be the decimal version of that. All right. Now a little practice for you. So go ahead and do your best. That means you might want to pause your video, and then we'll come back and do this together. All right, so hopefully you had some time. The first one's pretty easy. If we're up here on this point on our unit circle, I know that my cosine is 0 and my sine is 1 because my x values are that. Here we see that we have a negative 240 because they went clockwise with it. But my reference angle, remember you draw your side down to the nearest x-axis, would have to be 60 degrees. So I know that my short side is this part of the triangle, and here's my long side. So my x value, short side, would be a negative 1/2 in quadrant 2. And let me zoom in a little bit. But my long side is still positive in quadrant 2, and that is √3/2. So here's my cosine, here's my sine. And last but not least, we have 135 degrees. We're also in quadrant 2, where my x values will be negative and my y will be positive. So to draw in my reference angle, I know this is 45. And I know that the value for x is negative √2/2. Y's are still positive over here, so that's going to be a positive √2/2. And really, I'm being a little lazy for a short of time on the video. Really, what you should be writing is cosine of 135 equals a negative √2/2, and sine of 135 degrees equals a positive √2/2. All right, so here's that full page for notes. There's a short assignment associated with this, and just make sure you're asking questions if you're having any problems.